Welcome back to Spartan Up the Podcast. We are perennially your resiliency and accountability coaches, and we're bringing you great people from all over the world. Each week, I'm Sefra Alexandra. We have Joe De Sena, and this week we have a truly remarkable man with us. Joe?
This guy, Chris Waddell, is unbelievable. So incredible, in fact, that we invited him to come to our Tahoe World Championship, our media fest sponsored by ATP, and we said, hey, can you be the keynote speaker?
Now I want to tell you a little bit about the perspective that I gained by being in a chair.
Not everybody was in that room. There were only a couple hundred people in there. So we said, you know what, we got to do a podcast with this guy. We got to open up his mindset to the world. So I had the opportunity to sit down with him, and he is as remarkable as you think he would be.
Yep.
I think what he can teach us, the normal folks, is what our potential is. Because here's a guy who becomes paralyzed, and it doesn't stop him at all.
He becomes more successful in the sport that he was competing in after he gets his disability. So I think it's
He goes to the Olympics.
He goes to the Olympics.
Earns 15 medals.
15. And
Right? It gets awarded, I don't even know.
Dalai Lama.
It gets awarded a medal by the Dalai Lama.
Yeah.
I mean, come on. So if
It's
he could
amazing.
do that
Yep.
in a wheelchair,
And what can you do?
What is your excuse? I want you to watch this, listen to it, stay tuned to the end, because we're going to come back and we're going to accentuate the points that you need to bring home so that you can earn some medals and maybe go meet the Dalai Lama.
And get rid of those excuses.
That's right.
This episode of Spartan Up is brought to you by Spartan X Leadership. Find out more at SpartanXLeadership.com.
I am with Chris Waddell for Spartan Up Podcast. We're here at Lake Tahoe, and I am about to learn what makes this guy awesome. I heard a little bit last night. I heard your introduction from Lonnie Main. And by the way, we're giving him some Spartan Tea, right? We're going to try some of the Spartan Tea right from the mountains of Sparta. Tell me what you think. Taste that.
Right. It's a little warm right now, so.
Taste the taste. Not too hot.
All right.
It's tasty,
I love
right?
it. Yeah.
So
I like
check
it.
this out. I know
A little
this
spicy. That's kind of nice, yeah.
So the deal is, I'm in Sparta, Greece, and I see folks picking stuff from the mountains like a couple of thousand meters up, and I'm like, what is that? And they said, oh, you don't know? And I said, no, I don't know. It's the first time I was in Sparta, believe it or not. We're putting on the race. And they said, there's a plant that grows up here, and they've been picking it for a couple of thousand years. This was Hippocrates and Socrates tea.
Okay.
And then the warriors would drink it, and then they would take the leaves and rub it on their cuts and bruises, and it translates to English. It says, he is of iron. So I was like, how the do I not know about this tea? So we ended up buying like 30 tons of it off the mountain. It's cool because we're supporting Sparta.
Right.
And we should give back to Sparta because we got this badass name thanks to them. And so I'm trying to get the tea out there. Anyway, you could be honest if you
Awesome.
think it's
No,
good.
I really like it. This is great.
But I heard a little introduction on you last night, which you're pretty badass. I mean, do I define you as a skier?
You know, that's a good question.
Right.
Skiing was probably my first love. You know, I started ski racing when I was 6 years old. It's where I had my accident. It's where I had my greatest success in the Paralympics. But I don't know. I hope not to be defined by one thing. I've always thought of sport as being the platform for whatever I would do next as well. It's such a great teacher, right?
Sport is a great teacher. So 6 years old, where'd you grow up?
I grew up in Western Massachusetts, a place called Granby, Mass, which is about 5,000 people. 10 minutes away was a mountain called Mount Tom. I feel like there might be a little exaggeration calling it a mountain. It was 680 feet of vertical, so about half the height of the Empire State Building. But it was owned by a construction company. They had amazing snowmaking. They had lights. It was open until 9 o'clock at night. My parents both taught skiing. My brother and I both ski race. They'd pick us up from school. We'd drive over to the mountain, get all set up. And I mean, there were times that my brother and I were there from 3 o'clock in the afternoon until 9 o'clock at night. And, when we were 8, 9, 10 years old.
I'm such a student of like trying to hear stories like that and then learn so that I can apply it to my own life or my kids now. And I hear more often than not, and correct me if I'm wrong, like if you hear about an amazing Brazilian jiu-jitsu athlete or a skier in your case, or actually what you just described I've heard many times in skiing, so I want you to correct me,
Sure.
Or a swimmer, it's usually like the circumstances growing up, living in a situation like that, where you're just doing it every day. And so, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but the instinct to the listener right now or the viewer might be, oh no, you got to grow up in Colorado or in France to be. But I hear more often than not, like Eastern, small mountain, but every fucking day on the mountain.
It's repetition. It really is. I mean, so much of it is repetition, and obviously, there's a lot to gain by being on the big mountains, by being in Colorado, by being in those places. But you can get really good doing it over and over again on a mountain that doesn't have a lot of vertical, that doesn't have a lot of pitch. I think we had one steep pitch that was for about one turn.
Yeah.
But you grow up and you get to do it over. It's a repetitive sport. So if you learn how to turn, then you take that turn to something else and you can do it.
Bodie Miller, same story, right? New Hampshire.
Similar kind of deal. I mean, he was on a little bit bigger mountain, and Bodie's always a little bit different. Just in kind of, I mean, like Bodie is a genius in so many different ways. I mean, just in how I think he is sort of the ultimate outlier. That he's always looking at things
differently
and wanting to do it differently than everybody else. And I think he did that as a little kid, just based on the stories. I don't know Bodie well enough to speak for him by any means, but just from what I've learned, that's what it seems like.
So you don't even know it. You're skiing every day with your brother, and you're getting better and better and better. And where does that take you?
So I was skiing in college, and that was going to be the end of my skiing career. I skied at Middlebury College, Division I school, and really was hoping to ski well in college and have the end of my career. And sort of,
so
sometimes
no dream of the Olympics or
no dream, no.
Because you weren't good enough, or because
I wasn't good enough. I mean, I was good enough to know that I wasn't great.
Got it.
Really is what it comes down. And in some ways, I didn't get. One of the detriments of being in sort of the mountain where I was is the shorter season. So you ski every day, but you don't ski every day for months and months. And so I think that there were some missed opportunities, and that's the way I was looking at the end of my career. Was I wanted to figure out at least how good I could be. And right around there is when I had my accident. Really, I didn't get a chance
in college.
In college, so before I skied for the school, I had a skiing accident. I was at home. I had moved from Little Mount Tom to a little bit bigger Berkshire East, which is about 45 minutes from the house, and skied. Ski popped off in the middle of a turn, fell in the middle of the trail, didn't hit anything but the ground, and broke 2 vertebrae. And so then, life takes a hard right or a hard left or whatever you want to say. And But that was funny.
When that happened, sorry to interrupt. So that happens at that moment, I'm curious. Depression, right away?
No, and really, ultimately, when I was leaving the hospital, one of the head doctor called me in and said, "You're not ready to leave because you haven't been depressed." I was petrified of being depressed because what I saw around me and the limitations that could be my life moving forward. I was like, if I allow myself to be depressed, I could be stuck there forever. Like I'll be depressed later on when things are a little bit more comfortable. But right now, I've got to move forward and figure out who I am and prove to myself that I can still do what I want to do. So really, no, I wasn't depressed. I cried once in the hospital. And this isn't like me patting myself on the back, but it's
reality.
It's the reality of the situation in that it was so dire that I thought I need the best of myself. And if I let myself slip into self-pity and depression and worry, that I'm not going to get my strongest self, which is exactly what I need to recover.
Why do you think you had that? So many people don't have that ability if something bad happens. Why do you think you had that?
I think part of it is obviously family, right? When the doctor came out and told my parents and my brother that I'd broken my back, he came out and didn't have much of a bedside manner, kind of came out and said, "Look, your brother's broken his back, he'll never walk again." And then turned and left, just left them holding the bag, and they all cried. And when they were done, my father said, "That's the last time we can cry. We have to be strong for Chris." And I think that there's that sense of perspective that I get from them of this is a dire situation. And if it's a dire situation, you need to be really practical. You need to prioritize what is important and don't kind of wallow. Let's hit it head on and let's take it.
Deal with it.
And that's who my parents always were.
Probably didn't hurt either that growing up in the Northeast in those cold winters and you out there skiing, does toughen you up a bit.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
And
Icy.
there is an athlete mentality as well, right?
Yeah.
There's a bit of an ego that comes with being an athlete. Like, oh well, this applies to other people. It's not going to apply to me.
Sure.
And realistic or not, it helped me gain some momentum. It helped me gain it wasn't a completely overwhelming situation. It gave me an opportunity to say, no, I'm moving forward. I'm going to make this happen.
All right. So you're out of the hospital. You cried once. Then what happens?
I went back to school. I went back to Middlebury. So I left the hospital on Friday. I went to Middlebury that Sunday, 2 days later.
Wow.
Almost 200-year-old school built mostly out of granite on the top of a hill in northern Vermont in the middle of February in a wheelchair.
Wow.
And
was it at that time? What year was that?
That was February of 1989.
89. And I bet you the buildings were not set up to handle wheelchairs at that point.
They weren't. I didn't think that anybody in the administration knew who I was.
Right.
Why would you know that 1,900 kids? Like,
Sure.
I'm just one of 1,900 kids. They went over and above. It was. Yeah, they made buildings accessible. The one dean, Ann Hansen, called my mother and said, "Look, will you come up and walk the campus with me and tell me what we need to do to make this accessible?" And at that point, my mother knows more than she'd known before, but she didn't know a whole lot, because I was just in the hospital. But the school was so accommodating. They did absolutely everything that they could to make it and my friends couldn't have been better. I think when my parents looked at it and said, okay, this is all right, because we moved from my old 4th floor walk-up dorm to a 1st floor dorm that made it more accessible and easier. But I must have had 50 friends who were moving moving one room to the other room. And my parents kind of said, okay, there will be some support. I was taking French at the time, and I had 3 friends who would come and pick me up every morning because I was still in a body jacket. I was in a full turtle shell body jacket. I couldn't get up the hills. I couldn't, and so they'd push me and they'd take turns, and they loved it. And
that's awesome.
Yeah, it was really cool.
I mean, I guess that's why nobody does anything alone, right? You need a support crew to get through life, and that's an awesome part of the story.
It's a funny thing though too, right? Because I think as Americans we're taught to be John Wayne, right? This is it. Like you can do it all yourself, and
bottle of scotch and
yeah, exactly. And the more you realize that you are part of that team and creating that team and that support is really what makes you successful. You don't, as much as you think you do things on your own, you don't really do them on your own.
No. All right. So you get through college?
Got through college, so I started ski racing. And my ski coach, Bart Bradford, called me in the following fall and said, "Look, I was out at Mount Hood. I was skiing, coaching a camp, and the disabled team was there. And I saw these monoskiers. I think you should do this. Like, are you interested? Do you want to do it?" And I was like, "Yeah, I totally want to do it." So I stayed part of the team. The Friends of Middlebury Skiing bought my first monoski for me. I actually captained the team my senior year. I did my first race, I think, 2 weeks, 2, maybe 3 weeks after I started skiing. I was completely unprepared for it. Completely unprepared, but I wanted to make nationals. And so I went to this race, and luckily, in some ways, I synced into ski racer mentality. I had no right whatsoever to carry myself this way, but you inspect a course, and there's a way that you inspect a course, and you sort of look cool because you've spent many years trying to look cool. And so I synced right back into this, and I went out, and in my class I won the first run by 7 seconds, my first race. And thought, wow, okay. And I went, okay, well, maybe I don't have to go that fast the second run, because that was kind of scary. But made nationals that year, made the ski team, the U.S. ski team the following year. So I graduated. Middlebury has a skiing procession. So the February freshmen, the people who start in the middle of the year, will do full cap and gown at the Middlebury Snow Bowl. So we have sort of these control gates, and you have 50 people or whatever and ski down. And my grandparents were like, really, couldn't you have just graduated during the spring when it was warm? Because it was a typical just Vermont day where it was just gray and cold. And this was at the end of the day. And I was like, well, no, this seems more appropriate for me. And I left from there. That next day I flew to Durango for a speed camp with the ski team, and that was 1992, and I ended up making my first Paralympic Games that year and went to Albertville in March of '92. So kind of, what are you doing for your career? Well, I think I'm going to be a ski racer, I guess. And
so that's unbelievable. So you think finding that, had you not found that, right, which you got sucked right up into, it sounds like, and you were good at it, right, and you're getting pats on the back and all the things that a reward system that human beings need, it would have been tougher.
Things would have been tougher. It would have definitely
psychologically, right?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, we all want to be different in a good way, right? We want to be celebrated in a way. And one, I was most assuredly different on campus. I think everybody who was there at that time knew me. Oh, the guy in the wheelchair. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I know the guy in the wheelchair. I was the only guy in the wheelchair, so no confusion there. But yeah, finding an outlet, continuing to have my community. Skiing had been my community throughout. It was different than all my friends growing up too. My friends, we played baseball together and soccer together and things like that. But most of my friends in my little town didn't ski. And so I had a separate group of friends that were not necessarily just local. They were friends from other parts of the state and parts of New England and things like that. And so it was returning to my community, and it was an outlet, and it really was. It was a reason to work hard and something to love. That's what I tell people oftentimes. How do you recover from something?
You need
Find something to love. Have a
purpose. Let's take a break. Why don't we do a wheelchair race, you and I?
Okay.
And then we'll come back and learn more. I want to see how you got to today.
Okay.
Chris Waddell and many of the guests you hear on the Spartan Up podcast came to us by way of the Spartan X Leadership events. Spartan X Leadership, or SXL, is a one-day event where masters of industry collaborate, connect, and learn resiliency skills for optimal team performance. Throwing spears, climbing walls, and bringing the Spartan mindset to the fast-paced world of business. Learn more at SpartanXLeadership.com.
I got to tell you, no wonder your arms are so strong. It's pretty tough on that wheelchair.
My arms have become my legs, really.
Right.
And it's funny because it's the things there aren't a lot of people who use their arms for an endurance type of thing.
Sure.
And so now
you're doing it all day, every day, just like normally we use our legs all day, every day.
It's what you do. And so it's just, we as human beings have an amazing ability to adapt, right?
Yep.
And that's the way it works.
Here's a question for you. This is off topic a little bit, but this whole theory of go to the gym, today's leg day, tomorrow we're going to take off. Did we, 500 years ago, did we say, we can't hunt today because yesterday was leg day? Right? And so my point is, you're using that wheelchair every single day. You're using your arms and your shoulders. There was probably a week or two where you were sore, but then your body just adapts, right?
Well, I'm probably more sore from specific training, from going to the gym, from training in my racing wheelchair, depending upon what's going on. That's when I'm sore. From getting around in a regular chair, not that much, except that there are times where you do greater distances. Like in New York, I rarely take a taxi in New York just because it's almost just easier. I don't feel like getting in and out. And truth be told, I was in New York a fair amount when we were starting my foundation, and I had no money whatsoever. So then I didn't have a choice. But sometimes when you're hustling around, it's a different set of muscles. Like the backs of my shoulders suddenly are really sore. It feels like somebody's just smacked you across the back of the shoulders. But yeah, I mean, it's the same.
So you still get sore a little bit.
Oh, I still get sore every day. Yeah.
So you get out of Middlebury.
Get out of Middlebury. I go into being a full-time athlete for the first time in my life.
So no traditional job.
I did not do a traditional job. No, even when I was competing, my job became speaking, and when I had sponsors, it wasn't so much we're paying you to go and train and compete. It's we're paying you to make sense of your story for our people, both in a sales type of setting or on television or the radio and the media.
Basically to inspire people, hey, listen, if I could do it and I'm not depressed and I'm not, a lot of people just start feeling sorry for themselves, I guess. Just not even when they're disabled, just.
People do. I mean, I think everybody does, and I think, we all do, really is what it comes down to. And, excuse me. And I think that the biggest thing what we're trying to do, I got my first paid speaking gig after I won 2 medals in Albertville. I won silvers in the slalom and the giant slalom. And when you win something, people assume that you know something. And when they're paying me, I want to prove that I actually know something because I'd like more people to pay me.
Sure.
And so, but I think there is a process because the more competitive things get, the more the little things make a difference. The little things in terms of your motivation, in terms of your strategy, in terms of your performance, in terms of your routine, things that can be beneficial for other people and help them have more of a direction in their purpose.
So you're saying, like, once you're playing at a higher level, once the stakes are higher, because I say this too, and I think you're saying it more succinctly, the tiny little decisions, those tiny little things, are the separators between great and good.
They really are.
Right?
They really are, because everybody's had access to the same kind of training, to the same
They put
kind
in
of
10
equipment.
years, right?
Yeah, they've done their 10,000 hours or
Right.
whatever it is. And it is those little things. And those little things are often right between your ears, right? Those are the things that make the difference. How can you show up at a race and feel like, okay, I'm going to have fun here. This is going to be fun. Well, it really matters. This is really important. Like, why are you going to have fun? It's like, well, because if I'm having fun, that's when I'm creating. That's when I'm actually at my best. But our mind is going, hold on, no, shrink that down. Like, let's just do what we do well. And it's
Right.
like, no. Let's let things happen, and let's let our body be in an intuitive kind of place.
Would that be like a flow state?
I think it really is, and it's hard to get there. One of the things that I tried to do for myself in ski racing was convince myself before I went through the start that I'd made a mistake. And I had nothing to lose. It was all over. I'd already blown it. And so then I'm not worried about, okay, I don't want to take this risk here because then it's like, no, like let's just have that, turn the mind off, like take that out, because your mind is so slow that you can't react quickly enough. You can't think quickly enough to actually have a benefit. You have to do all of your thinking before you arrive there.
I like that. I like a pre-challenge, starting behind the eight ball, I guess, that's what you would do.
It really is. And I felt like when I was training, the intention of training was to teach my body instinct. So if I did over and over again, if I did things technically properly, then my muscles knew what to do. And then if I'm in crisis, then my muscles go, hey, got it. Don't worry about it.
Don't have to think about it. So I mean, that's the Phelps story, right? You hear his coach would purposely screw things up in practices because when things do go wrong, which they do,
invariably,
he's already practiced that.
And when you go to a big event, everything is different. So like when I was competing in Nagano in 1998, I was up at 3:30 in the morning to get to breakfast, to take a 2-hour bus to the mountain. And so by the time the race comes around, you're thinking, I'm kind of tired. Like, I feel like I need a nap now.
Sure.
And this is the stuff that you don't see on television, but the stuff that you think, okay, well, this is what I've been preparing for the whole time, and now they've changed the game on me.
Yeah. What other little tips could we apply to our own lives that you picked up along the way, and you would give in one of these speaking gigs? So start behind the eight ball.
Start behind the eight ball.
Yeah.
Be committed right in the beginning. So like downhill scared me to death. In a monoski, it's kind of like my feeling was anytime I hit a jump, I ran the risk of doing, if you've ridden your mountain bike, of hitting a jump and landing on the front wheel and going over the top with 35 pounds of metal strapped to my butt. It didn't sound like an enticing thing that I wanted to do. But for me, I would say in downhill, my goal was to race to the first gate. If I can be as committed as I possibly can to that first gate, then I'm going, which I try to do when I'm speaking as well. Like, come out and actually say something when you start, as opposed to, I'm kind of like happy to be here, whatever, you guys are great.
I love that. Race to the first gate, and you can apply that to every part of your life.
You really can, because one, then you're bringing your best self to that moment, as opposed to, well, I'm going to hold it in reserve because I think this person is going to say no to me about whatever. You're calling a sponsor or whatever, and it's like, hey, this is what we do. And it's like, hey, this is the best part of who I am. I'm going to give it to you. But then also, when you try to go fast, everything slows down. When you're worried about going too fast, then everything seems to speed up.
And plus, you probably build momentum. If you race to that first gate, now you've got momentum. Not in a physics sense,
Right.
but like in a mental sense too, right?
It really is.
We're going.
Yeah, and you're in the flow.
You're in the flow.
Yeah, it really is.
So so start behind the 8 ball, come out of the gates hard.
Yeah.
And then what would the third thing? People like threes.
People like threes. What would the third thing be? I think the third thing is this belief that things are going to go wrong, right? That things are going to go wrong. With my foundation, our motto is, it's not what happens to you, it's what you do with what happens to you. And it's like, things are going to go wrong, but it's a matter of how quickly you recover. When you recover quickly, like ski racing, there's no such thing as a perfect run. But if you're committed to, I'm going to keep my skis pointed down the hill the whole time, and if things are going, this is back to Bodie Miller, right? I mean, Bodie, sometimes if you watch his skis, you're like, wow, that's brilliant. If you watch everything else, you're like, whoa, like that guy was totally out of control the whole time, right? And Bodie would probably tell us differently, that Bodie's always in control. But at the same time, I think it's that belief of like, don't get yourself overly worried by perfection, because perfection is a mirage. It's like the commitment to
accept that things are going to go wrong. Do you believe on that third one? I like to say we should practice that. We should practice tough. We should practice obstacles. Same way you practice yoga, right? Or you practice math or piano, because if you don't practice hard and obstacles, which is the whole reason for Spartan, what the fuck are you going to do when it happens?
It is. I think you have to become comfortable being uncomfortable. And so you have to put yourself in those situations where you feel uncomfortable. It is.
Let's talk about the foundation.
So foundation, One Revolution Foundation, our mission is to turn perception of disability upside down. Disability comes with it the definition of, well, this is less. And it's like, well, let's turn it around. Like I get people who say to me in my racing chair, like, I'll come for a jog with you. I'm like, I don't know if you really want to do that. Like, I don't think you'll really enjoy that, short of being sort of, one of the top Kenyans kind of thing. Like, we'll warm up at like 12 miles an hour kind of thing. That's 5-minute miles. Right. So, I think that the perception can change. Like, wheelchair world record for a marathon is 1 hour and 18 minutes.
Wow.
So that's
let's
3 minute miles.
Flip it on its head and not look at it as a disability, but look at it like, holy shit. In some ways you got an advantage.
Yeah, it's like, hey, I have to help you out. And it's like, well, kind of, well, maybe, but then I can finish. I can go back to my hotel. I can get, take a shower, grab a bite to eat, get changed.
You're still running.
And come back and watch the runners finish, right? It's like, I did a marathon at one point with an old girlfriend, and she was saying, well, I wanted to make sure that you guys only played 9 holes of golf in between when you finished and I finished, not 18.
That's great.
We didn't end up doing that, but that was her goal. So, but yeah, I think that those are and so the foundation. So our big thing is our school presentation. It's called Nametags, and it looks at the labels that we put on ourselves and others. And these are our limitations, right? We're pretty good at it. I'm too old. I'm too fat. I'm too tired. I'm too busy, I'm too poor. These are reasons why we don't do things. And so it's resilience-based. It's not what happens to you, it's what you do with what happens to you. But it's also opening kids' eyes to finding their own path.
And eliminating those labels.
And eliminating those labels. I mean, yeah, and the thing is that we have the ability to change those labels too, right? We have the ability to change our limitations. But then, as they're going through school, to figure out, well, what matters to me? What's my passion? What's my purpose? Because we're far more invested in something that we care about.
Yeah, it's easier when you're right. You found your purpose. It's easier. And if you're out there and you're listening or you're watching and you haven't found your purpose, what I like to say to people, I don't know if you agree with this or not, is don't sit around expecting it to come to you.
No.
Go do whatever. You just be doing, right? And you bump into it. You didn't know that.
I didn't know, and the funny thing is, if I look back at myself in college right now, if my college self saw me, and my college self would go, really? So like, this is what you're doing. This is what you've decided to do, where you're speaking. I hated being in front of crowds. Hated talking in class. And even now, it's funny. Like, you say, okay, give me an hour and a half. Okay, I'll give you an hour and a half. But ask a question in a crowd, it's looping through my brain. It's like, okay, let's do this. I'm in the midst of doing the illustrations for my second children's book.
Nice.
my college self would go, really? So you're writing children, and you learned how to draw. I had to read a book that taught me how to draw.
That's awesome.
And I think that part of it is the idea, the passion is really the creation, right? The being creative and figuring out how to move forward. And I think it's being open to it, because my high school and college self is like, really? So you want to do that kind of stuff? Like you want to learn how to draw? Like, come on, man. We've got other stuff to do. And even when I was my secondary rehab, and this was a transformational moment for me. I went to this place. It was a holistic healing center, so a lot of body work, Rolfing, Feldenkrais, massage. One of the guys who started it was actually a choreographer, so there was a dance aspect to it, body movement, these kinds of things. And at the end, an off-Broadway company came on to put on a play. I had started the summer. I said, look, you know what? I'm coming into this place in a wheelchair, but I'm walking out of here. Like, this is it. Right. Been fun knowing you guys, but that's what I'm doing. And these guys said, hey, will you audition for the play? And I said, no. I don't do that stuff. Like, I'm an athlete. I'm not an actor. And they said, come on, just audition. And my whole thing was that science, medicine had no answers for me. So I said yes to everything, which is really sort of the first tenet of improv, that if you're an improv, you say yes and. This is it. Hey, this is a scenario. Because if you say no, then the whole thing ends. Right. And so I said yes, and I auditioned, and I ended up getting cast as the lead in this play.
That's awesome.
Which was amazing. And so, and
because you had an open mind and you were accepting, and yes, and
it was nothing that I ever would have done before. But then the energy between me and the audience, and also being in that position where you don't know what you're going to say, you don't know what you're going to do, but knowing I can come up with something. I can make something work. And being in that moment and being able to create in that moment, to me, was completely intoxicating.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
All right. How could people find out more about the foundation and help out?
So foundation is One Revolution. So it's ONE-revolution.org. They can find me on Chris Waddell Speaking. So it's ChrisWaddell speaking.com. I have my books there. Nice. I've done one of the children's books, which is called "Is It Lonely to Be a Four-Leaf Clover?"
Nice.
I did one based on a graduation speech that I did at Middlebury, which is called "Things I Want to Remember, Not to Forget." I don't know about you, but I learn things and then I forget them and then I learn them again. Yeah. So this is helping people to do that. It's a short book, but it's
that's fun.
Series of anecdotes. And I've also started writing my memoir on there. So I have 7 written chapters, audio chapters, and then conversations with people who have been important to my life. Like I tracked down the guy who had been my nurse in the hospital 30 years ago.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So these kinds of things. So
you're awesome.
Sounds good.
Thanks
a ton. Thanks for what you do.
I love this idea of crying for the last time and then moving on.
Yep. I think it's like a healing thing. There's a lot of like serotonins and things that are released with crying. You honor this situation, but then you move on and you make a plan.
Yeah, because otherwise it could be an anchor, right?
Yeah, an anchor for depression, bad, cycles of thought in your brain.
It is what it is. So if you're out there, you're listening, you're watching, and you've had some tragic thing or even something that's not tragic, right? And it's weighing on you and you're thinking about it and it's running around like a hamster wheel in your head, get rid of it. Mourn it, move on.
That's like the ceremony. Like you mourn it, you bury it, you go, right? And it's
there was a guy we interviewed, I don't know if you remember, Nate Carr, Olympic wrestler. He said what he would do is close his eyes, write it on a piece of paper, crumple it up, throw it in fire. It's gone.
Yeah. That's like we do that at survival skills as well. And you say like, just be careful because if you're really burning in that fire, don't breathe in that smoke because that energy is like you want that to blow away. But, I think like he's saying you have the death race, right? So the death race is like one of the hardest endurance races in the country. And this past year, they broke their world record crawling under barbed wire. And it's that kind of thing where he says yes and. He's talking about that improv concept. So it's saying like all of these guys, they come out. They get lean in because it's like, here's an obstacle, but what's next?
Johnny likes to say, our co-host, so what?
Yeah, what?
Move on. Move forward.
Yeah, and so...
I love that.
So do I.
Let's talk about self-awareness.
I think oftentimes what happens, right, what he talks about a lot is like you can't deal with these labels that are put onto you because people are going to look at you and they're just going to say like, oh, you have a disability. But if you listen to that, then it's like, hey, actually... I became more successful in my sport after I got injured. And like, it's not a disability. This is my ability. So you have to tune into your own self-awareness to celebrate what your passion what your drive is.
Because otherwise you can label yourself something that other people are determining as opposed to what you're capable of.
Yeah, because we talk about it all the time. Like, it doesn't matter what shape, manner, form all these people are in. It's the way that you present yourself and you come out. It's like he talks about, like, we're racing to the first gate. Whenever you're doing anything in life, just start out with that momentum.
Hit it hard.
I
like that.
Right? It's like, whatever you're doing,
the genius lies within. That was another big takeaway.
Yeah. I think that, again, it's all about that, like, what are you passionate about? Because don't be defined by the things that happen to you. Be defined by what you do with that, right?
This guy goes out and gets 15 medals post-accident.
Yep, and awarded a medal by the Dalai Lama.
Right.
And nearly was the first paraplegic with an unassisted ascent to Kilimanjaro.
I love that.
So when you think about it, like,
I think the big takeaway for me is cry and move on and race to the first gate. Yep. Right? Just attack it.
Yep.
I love that. But if you're out there and something's holding you back, and whether it's a big thing or a little thing, we want to hear about it. We want to know how you're going to redefine that thing and attack life. How are you going to race to the first gate?
Yep. Keep your skis pointed downhill.
Oh, I like that one too. There's another good one.
This episode of Spartan Up is brought to you by Spartan X Leadership. Find out more at SpartanXLeadership.com.